So how do we even start to wrap our heads around God's choices, especially when you think about who's sort of in the plan and who might seem out? Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really diving deep, plunging right into Romans chapter 9.
Yeah, and our source material for this is a really insightful study. It unpacks some seriously complex theological ideas, things like election, and crucially, the unique status of Israel.
That's right. And our mission today really is to pull out the most important nuggets from this study for you. We want to help you get a real handle on what the Apostle Paul was communicating about God's sovereignty, his big plan, especially concerning Israel and, well, everyone else, the Gentiles.
Yeah.
And like you said, the study, it definitely challenges some common ideas, maybe assumptions you hold, like that whole concept of replacement theology. Exactly. The idea that the church has somehow taken Israel's place. We'll see how this study pushes back on that. Our aim here is to give you a clear, hopefully engaging and really memorable grasp of Romans 9. Maybe spark a few aha moments along the way. Okay, let's get into it then. Right at the start, Paul begins Romans 9 by, strongly asserting he's telling the truth. He even says he's governed by the Ruach HaKodesh, that's the Hebrew for the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And this focus on truthfulness is so important because, as the study points out, Paul was actually being accused of lying. Some even called him an enemy of the Jews.
Yeah, and what's really striking, almost immediately after that defense, he expresses this grief so great, the pain in my heart so constant.
Yeah.
And it's for his brothers, his own flesh and blood, the people of Israel. That context is just vital, isn't it?
Absolutely. It shows this deep, deep love he still had, this anguish for his own people, even while they're accusing him. And his mission is primarily to the Gentiles.
It's powerful stuff.
It really is. I mean, he goes so far as to wish himself under God's curse and separated from the Messiah if it would help my brothers.
Mm-hmm.
For someone like Paul, so devoted to Yeshua Messiah, Jesus the Anointed One, that's an incredible statement of sorrow. What's the study say is really behind that level of heartbreak?
Well, that hits on a really critical point about salvation itself.
Yeah.
The study highlights that Paul absolutely knew Yeshua Messiah was the only way to God. There wasn't another path in his understanding. So his deep sorrow, it came from watching his own people, the Jews, reject Yeshua. He understood what that meant for them, their fate, without that connection.
Ah, okay.
And this, directly confronts a pretty popular modern idea that, maybe all those who believe in God are going to heaven, regardless of specifics.
Right.
Paul's perspective, as shown here, is much more specific. Salvation isn't just a general hope in God. It's about a concrete personal relationship through Yeshua Messiah. That's a really crucial distinction, especially today.
Okay, so Paul's deep sorrow for his people, that leads us into something fascinating the study lays out. These 7 foundational truths about Israel. Truths that, as the source puts it, make it not possible for the nation of Israel to be eliminated or replaced. This seems central to countering that replacement theology idea. Can you walk us through these 7 points?
Absolutely. And you're right. They're not minor details. They are presented as foundational pillars. So first, Israel was uniquely made God's children. No other nation is called the son of God in the same way.
Okay, 1.
Second, they experienced the Shekinah, which is described as the visual, the actual physical presence of God among them.
Wow.
Third, they received the covenants, those sacred promises God made, starting with Abraham.
The Abrahamic covenant. Right?
Exactly. Fourth, they were given the Torah, God's law, famously including the 10 Commandments.
Okay.
Fifth, they were chosen for temple service, the whole ordained system of worship centered there. Sixth, they were the direct recipients of the many promises God made specifically to them as a nation. And seventh, maybe the most significant for this argument, they had the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and crucially, the lineage from which came the Messiah himself.
Okay, that's quite a list. 7 distinct things
Yeah.
setting Israel apart. So stepping back, what does this all mean for us, for you listening, trying to understand God's bigger picture?
Well, the big takeaway here, perhaps one of those aha moments, is that these 7 unique markers are argued to fundamentally dismantle replacement theology. They demonstrate God's enduring, seemingly unbreakable covenant relationship with Israel. The idea isn't that the church replaces Israel, but maybe joins Israel in God's wider plan.
So expansion, not substitution.
That's a good way to put it. It's about God broadening his reach, bringing Gentiles in alongside Israel, who still holds these unique distinctions.
That clarifies things. But you mentioned earlier, the study points out Paul saying not everyone from Israel is truly part of Israel. So being born into physical Israel isn't automatic entry into Abraham's spiritual children.
Exactly. There's a distinction made between, you could say, the physical descendants of Abraham through Jacob and then Abraham's spiritual children, those who share his faith, who become children of God through that faith.
Okay.
So the key insight for you listening is that simply being in that first group, the physical lineage, doesn't automatically put you in the second group. Our faith relationship with God through Yeshua Messiah mirrors Abraham's own faith journey. It's personal.
Which leads perfectly into this whole concept of election, God's sovereign choice. How does Paul illustrate this? He uses examples, right?
He does two really powerful ones. First, there's Isaac versus Ishmael.
Right, both Abraham's sons.
Both his natural children, yes.
Yeah.
But Isaac was the child that was promised from God. Ishmael, the study suggests, represented an attempt by man to fulfill the promise through their own efforts.
Ah, human effort versus divine promise.
Precisely. It highlights that ongoing tension, that struggle, perhaps, between relying on God's grace and trying to achieve salvation through our own works.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second example, Jacob and Esau, that one seems even more stark.
It really does. Because with Jacob versus Esau, Paul points out that before they were born, before they had done anything at all, good or bad, God declared the older will serve the younger.
Before they'd done anything.
Anything. That's the point Paul stresses. It powerfully underscores that God's plan, his choice in this instance, was a matter of his sovereign choice, not dependent on what they did, but on God who does the calling. Now, the study does add a note about God's justice here, pointing out that Esau's later life, becoming godless and prideful, sort of affirms the righteousness of God's foreknowledge and choice. But the initial choice wasn't based on their actions.
Okay, I can see how people might struggle with that. Hearing chosen before birth, regardless of actions. It immediately brings up the question of fairness, doesn't it? The text even anticipates this. So are we to say it is unjust for God to do this? How do Paul and the study tackle that very direct question about God's justice?
The response in the text is immediate and strong. Heaven forbid, or by no means. The study reinforces this, clarifying that the perspective here is God knows the hearts of all men, and so his decisions are just. Even if we don't fully understand the mechanics of it. It uses Pharaoh as another example, someone God says he raised up so that in connection with you I might demonstrate my power. It suggests God's choices serve his ultimate righteous purposes, which include revealing his power and glory.
That really brings to mind the pottery analogy Paul uses later, right? The clay and the potter.
Exactly. It's like a piece of pottery turning to the potter and complaining, why did you make me like this? The study emphasizes a key point here. We forget that we would be nothing without the Creator. We're the creation, he's the creator. From this perspective, God's choices are seen as acts of grace. It's a gift. And the study suggests we just have to accept the fact that God gives this gift to those he chooses. It's definitely a challenging concept, very humbling.
Okay, so if God is sovereign and just and he makes these choices, another question naturally arises. Why does he allow evil and sin to persist? The study knows Paul saying God patiently put up with people who deserved punishment. That patience can be hard to understand sometimes.
It really can. And this gets into the whole mystery of God's timing, doesn't it? The study puts it quite simply. God is patient, and only he knows when all of his children have been gathered. There's a process unfolding that we don't see the end of yet. But there's another reason given too. God allows evil to continue, paradoxically, in order to make known the riches of his glory to those who are the objects of his mercy.
How does that work?
Well, the contrast makes the mercy shine brighter, perhaps. The study draws a contrast with our own culture's demand for instant gratification. It suggests that maybe waiting, enduring through difficulty, ultimately makes us appreciate God's grace and deliverance even more when it fully comes. It builds anticipation and reliance on him.
That's an interesting perspective. So as God's plan unfolds patiently, what does this mean for salvation becoming available to all people, not just Israel?
Well, Paul brings in the prophets here. He quotes Hosea saying, "Those who are not my people, I will call my people." That's a clear signal, isn't it? God's grace is extending outward to the Gentiles.
Okay, so the door is opened wide.
Yes, but then there's a balancing quote from Isaiah reminding Israel that only a remnant will be saved.
So not everyone within physical Israel is automatically saved either.
Exactly. And that's a profound insight, maybe another aha moment for you listening. Your physical lineage, your family background, it doesn't guarantee your place in heaven. The study stresses.
Yeah.
It is only through a personally restored relationship with God that we are saved. It's about individual faith, not just group identity.
Which brings us right to the end of the chapter and this idea of the stumbling stone. What is that about?
Right. So Paul observes that the Gentiles, who weren't initially pursuing righteousness in the same way, actually obtained righteousness. It was grounded in trusting,
Yeah.
through faith.
Okay.
But Israel, who had the Torah, the law, largely did not reach what the Torah offers. And Paul asks why.
Why?
Because they did not pursue righteousness as being grounded in trusting, but as if it were grounded in doing legalistic works. They were trying to earn it through rule-keeping.
Got it. So the stumbling stone.
The stumbling stone is identified as the grace of God, as demonstrated by Yeshua Messiah. It's stumbling because it's a gift, not something earned. People trip over grace because they want to rely on their own efforts, their own merits, their works. But the study is emphatic, reflecting Paul. Works have no part in salvation. It's purely a gift received by faith.
And the final assurance.
Comes again from Isaiah. He who rests his trust on it, on Yeshua, the cornerstone will not be humiliated or put to shame. Trusting in God's grace through Messiah is the only path that leads to ultimate vindication.
Wow. Okay, we have definitely covered a lot of ground today. A true deep dive into Romans 9, God's sovereignty, Israel's really unique place, and this absolutely central role of grace through Yeshua Messiah.
Yeah, we've touched on Paul's incredible sorrow for his own people, those 7 defining marks of Israel's heritage that argue against replacement, and God's sovereign, unchanging election. And it all seems to point back to this one core truth, doesn't it? Salvation isn't about works. It's not about your family tree. It's about trusting in God's gift, a personal relationship.
Right. So for you listening today, hopefully this deep dive helps show how these ancient words, this chapter, can still speak so directly to how we understand faith and justice and really the heart of God's big plan for all of us. It's definitely more than just, ancient history. It hits right at the core of belief.
Mm-hmm. And maybe it leaves us with a challenge to think about. If salvation truly is purely a gift of grace, totally separate from our efforts or our background, what does that really mean for how we live out our faith? How does it change how we see ourselves, how we engage with the world? It makes you wonder, doesn't it, what assumptions or efforts we might be stumbling over in our own understanding of God's grace.
That's a powerful thought to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Romans 9. Until next time, keep exploring these ideas, keep asking questions, and keep learning.